The day Emily Carter told the world she had no mother anymore was the same day her mother quietly signed the will that would drag every buried truth back into the light. On a gray November afternoon in Columbus, Ohio, the wind rattled the windows of the small brick house where 76-year-old Margaret Carter had lived alone for the last decade. Inside, the living room smelled faintly of old books, lavender cleaner, and the apple pies she used to bake every Sunday when her family still came around. Now there was only the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of a cheap wall clock, counting down the moments to a decision she knew she would never see unfold. Across from her, attorney David Collins sat on the edge of the sofa with a leather folder balanced on his knees. He had been in hundreds of living rooms like this, watched hundreds of faces pretend to be calm while their hearts cracked in quiet corners, but there was something in Margaret's steady gaze, the way her thin hands lay folded in her lap, that told him this was not just another document signing. This felt like a confession disguised as paperwork. "Are you sure about this, Mrs. Carter?" he asked gently, his Midwestern accent softening the question. "You know your daughter may not take this well when the time comes." Margaret's lips twitched, almost remembering how to smile. "Emily already erased me from her life, Mr. Collins," she replied, her voice raspy but firm. "This is just me telling the truth she refused to hear while I was still breathing." Outside, traffic rolled along the wet street, tires hissing on pavement as people rushed home from work, stopping at Kroger or Target for last-minute groceries and pumpkin candles. They had no idea that inside this quiet house, an old woman was preparing one last message for the daughter who had blocked her number, returned her Christmas cards, and told the rest of the family she was done pretending she had a mother. Years earlier, when Emily first posted online that she was no contact with her mother, friends had flooded the comments with hearts and applause emojis. "Proud of you for setting boundaries. You don't owe anyone access to you." When family can be toxic, too. They didn't know Margaret. Didn't know the nights she had slept in her car outside Emily's college dorm just to feel closer to her, or the secret that had shaped every cold word Emily ever spat in her direction. Have you ever watched the internet cheer for a version of the story you know isn't the whole truth? Now, as Margaret reached for the pen, her hand trembled slightly, not from doubt but from age and the weight of everything left unsaid. Her once dark hair was now a soft gray cloud pinned into a simple bun at the nape of her neck. She wore her favorite light blue cardigan, the one Emily had given her on a long-ago Mother's Day, before silence settled between them like a locked door. "If this moment hits you," the unseen narrator might murmur, "tell me, who would you trust? The one who speaks the loudest, or the one who stayed quiet the longest?" David watched as she signed her name in slow, careful strokes at the bottom of the final page. Margaret Carter. The ink bled slightly into the paper, as if it were absorbing not only her name, but the years of sacrifice, fear, and choices that had led them here. "I don't want her money," Margaret whispered, more to herself than to him. "I want her to know the truth. After that, she can still hate me if she needs to, but at least she'll hate the real me, not the monster she invented to survive." 2 miles away, in a modern townhouse with white walls, black fixtures, and a fridge full of organic groceries, 34-year-old Emily slammed her laptop shut after a long video call with her therapist. Her chest still felt tight, a knot of anger and grief she could never quite untangle. "You're doing the right thing," her therapist had reassured her. "Protecting yourself from a parent who hurt you, even if other people don't understand, is an act of self-respect." Emily had nodded, then later caught herself staring at the one framed photo of her mother she hadn't thrown away, tucked face down in a dresser drawer. Her Instagram showed brunches, yoga classes, and weekend trips to Lake Erie, but none of that ever touched the part of her that still woke up some nights with her jaw clenched and her pillow damp. From the outside, Emily looked like she had built the perfect new life. A stable marketing job at a tech company downtown, a fiancé named Ryan who adored her, and a golden retriever who greeted her at the door every evening. Her friends envied her new kitchen, her neatly color-coded planner, her way of joking about going low contact, like it was just another wellness trend. But there was a private part of her story that never made it to her feed. The recurring nightmare where she stood in front of her childhood home yelling, "You're not my mother," while a younger version of herself watched from the porch, silently begging her not to leave. If you were in Emily's place, would you forgive a parent you believed had already ruined your childhood? Or would you lock the door and throw away the key? Emily had chosen the second option. She had told relatives, "She's dead to me. Please stop bringing her up." The words tasted like broken glass every time she said them, but they also gave her a strange sense of control, like she was finally the one writing the story instead of being trapped inside it. Have you ever ignored a warning your heart tried to give you, just because anger felt safer than uncertainty? Back at the brick house, a cold draft slipped under the front door as the late afternoon light began to fade. Margaret shifted in her chair and glanced toward the small framed photo on the mantel. Emily at 16, in her red marching band uniform, cheeks flushed, eyes bright with hope. "She was always so determined," Margaret said softly, catching David's glance. "Once she decided I was the villain, there was no changing her mind. But she never knew what I was trying to protect her from." David tilted his head, curiosity flickering across his features, despite his years of practiced neutrality. Lawyers learned to keep a professional distance from the stories hidden beneath the legal language they handled, but this one tugged at him. Margaret must have seen it, because she took a breath and added, "There are things a mother will do to keep her child safe that the child may never forgive. That's what this will is about. It's not about money. It's about finally putting the whole story on the table." On the coffee table between them lay a worn manila envelope, a small stack of old Polaroids bound with a rubber band, and a silver locket Emily had once worn every day. Margaret's fingers brushed the locket, and for a moment her eyes grew distant, as if she were seeing a much younger Emily running barefoot through the backyard on humid Ohio summers that used to feel endless. Have you ever seen someone hide their pain to protect you? The narrator might ask now. And if you had known the truth earlier, would it have changed the way you treated them? David cleared his throat gently. "When the time comes, your daughter will have to sit in my office and listen to everything you've written," he said. "Are you prepared for the possibility that she might walk out before I finish?" Margaret nodded slowly. "I am," she answered. "But the truth has a way of following you, even when you slam the door in its face. She can walk out. The truth will still be waiting whenever she's ready." The radiator hissed to life in the corner, filling the quiet with a low, steady sound like a sigh that had been held for years. David slid the signed documents back into the leather folder, then carefully added the envelope and the photographs, each piece another thread in the story Emily thought she already knew. Margaret leaned back, exhausted but strangely at peace, like someone who had finally mailed a letter she'd been rewriting in her mind for half a lifetime. At the doorway, David paused and looked back at her. "Is there anything you'd like me to tell her, beyond what's in the will?" he asked. Margaret hesitated, then shook her head. "No," she said softly. "Everything I never managed to say is in those pages. Just make sure she knows I never stopped loving her. Not for one single day." As the door closed behind him, Margaret sat alone in the fading light, listening to the neighborhood sounds drifting in from outside. A dog barking, a car door slamming, kids laughing as they ran down the sidewalk. Life moved on all around her, indifferent to the storms brewing inside that little brick house. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the slow, tired thud of her heart, and whispered, "I'm sorry, baby. One day, you'll understand why I did what I did." Across town, Emily stood in her spotless kitchen, staring at a text from her aunt that she had left unread for hours. "Honey, I know you're hurt, but your mom isn't well. Maybe it's time to talk." Emily's thumb hovered over the screen, torn between deleting the message and finally answering. Instead, she locked her phone and walked away, convincing herself she was done reopening old wounds. Little did she know that a single document signed in that quiet brick house was already waiting to upend everything she believed about her mother and about herself. The truth about Emily Carter didn't begin the day she cut her mother out of her life. It began decades earlier, in a modest two-story home on Ashford Lane where the walls were thin. The winters were harsh, and the secrets were even harsher. Margaret had once believed that love alone could protect a child, but Ohio nights had a way of proving how wrong a mother could be. Before the silence, before the distance, there were the years when Emily was a bright-eyed girl who trusted her mother more than anyone else in the world. And there was the man who slowly shattered that trust, piece by piece. When Emily was 7, she used to crawl into Margaret's lap as they watched fireflies outside on summer evenings. Her laughter sparkled like the tiny lights drifting through the air, and Margaret would tuck her hair behind her ear and whisper, "You're my whole world, Em." Back then, Emily believed her. Back then, there were no slammed doors, no hateful sentences shouted through tears, no therapist teaching her about boundaries or trauma. Back then, life felt safe, until Margaret remarried. That was the moment everything changed, though Emily wouldn't understand how deeply until much later. Her stepfather, Richard Lowell, wasn't cruel at first. He was charming in the way men are when they want something, bringing flowers, complimenting neighbors, acting generous at church potlucks. But beneath his well-pressed shirts and polite smile lived a temper like a loaded gun, explosive and unpredictable. The first time he yelled at Emily, she was 8, and all she had done was leave her backpack on the couch. Margaret tried to intervene, but Richard snapped at her too, and something in her eyes dimmed. What truth did she swallow that night that Emily wasn't old enough to understand? Emily often told people she went no contact because Margaret was emotionally cold, because she never protected her, because she chose a man over her own daughter. The internet applauded her for being brave enough to speak her truth. But the truth she didn't know, the one Margaret would take to her grave unless the will revealed it, was far more complicated. Margaret had protected her. She had shielded Emily from things that would have shattered her childhood completely. But protection sometimes looks, from the outside, like betrayal. If you've ever misjudged someone because you only knew half the story, you understand the weight of that kind of mistake. In middle school, Emily began avoiding the house, signing up for every after-school activity she could. Theater club, science fair, soccer, marching band. She thrived anywhere that wasn't home. Margaret noticed, of course. She packed extra snacks, attended every game, and cheered louder than any other parent in the bleachers. But Emily never saw the exhaustion in her mother's face, or the bruises Margaret carefully covered with makeup, or the way she slept on the edge of the bed to avoid waking Richard's rage. Margaret carried the danger so Emily didn't have to, and Emily mistook that burden for distance. On the night of Emily's 13th birthday, Margaret had baked her favorite chocolate cake with vanilla frosting. But Richard came home late, smelling of whiskey, and ruined the celebration with one angry outburst after another. Emily ran to her room, sobbing, and Margaret wanted to follow her. But Richard grabbed her wrist and whispered something that made her freeze. She never told Emily what he said. She never told anyone. Some wounds don't leave scars you can show, but they still shape every decision you make. Share your truth. Have you ever seen someone hide their pain to protect you? When Emily left for college, she hugged Margaret stiffly, a habit formed from years of misunderstanding. Margaret held on a moment longer, hoping her daughter might soften, but Emily pulled away. She didn't see the panic flicker across her mother's eyes, the fear of leaving her alone with Richard, and she certainly didn't know that, within a year, Margaret would finally find the courage to leave him for good. She packed a suitcase, walked out in the middle of the night, and never looked back. But Emily only heard fragments from relatives, and by then, she had already decided who the villain was. It took Margaret years to rebuild her life. She found work at a small bookstore downtown, rented the brick house near the elementary school, and surrounded herself with quiet routines: morning coffee on the porch, crossword puzzles, weekly church visits. She sent Emily letters, care packages, even birthday gifts. Most came back unopened with a yellow sticker labeled "Return to Sender." She kept everyone in a shoebox under her bed, unable to throw away even the hope of reconciliation. What's the hardest goodbye you've ever faced? One you chose or one chosen for you? Emily, meanwhile, built a life that looked perfect from the outside. She excelled at Ohio State University, landed a good job, built a friend group who reinforced her belief that cutting off her mother was necessary self-healing. She dated carefully, choosing men who seemed stable and safe. When she met Ryan, she felt something new: stability, affection, predictability. He never raised his voice, never criticized her, never made her feel small. Emily convinced herself she had finally escaped her past. But the past has a way of knocking on your door when you least expect it, sometimes literally. 2 years before Margaret signed the will, Emily received a voicemail from an unknown number. The voice on the recording was thin, raspy, almost trembling. "Hi, sweetheart, it's Mom. I know you don't want to talk to me, but I just wanted you to know I'm okay. And I hope you're okay, too. That's all." Emily deleted it before the message finished. She told herself she was protecting her peace, but the truth was she couldn't handle how much it hurt to hear that fragile voice. She couldn't face the possibility that she had been wrong. Have you ever refused to pick up a call because you feared what the truth might sound like? Back in the present, as attorney David Collins locked the folder containing the will inside his office safe, he couldn't stop thinking about Margaret's words. "She never knew what I was trying to protect her from." He wondered what secrets could be so heavy they survived decades of silence. He wondered why Emily believed such a different version of her childhood, and he wondered why Margaret had chosen now, of all times, to reveal the truth. Outside his office window, the sky was turning the pale orange of an early winter sunset. But inside, something darker lingered. Margaret spent that night sitting in her old recliner, wrapped in a knitted blanket, staring at the front door as if expecting someone to knock. She opened the shoebox of returned letters and slowly traced Emily's name, written in her own careful handwriting. So much love wasted, so many chances missed. More than anything, she wished she could tell Emily face to face why she had made the choices she did. But her heart was failing, and her doctor had warned her months ago that time was no longer something she could afford to waste. She had signed the will because she needed Emily to know the truth before it was too late. Across town, Emily curled up on her couch with her dog and a blanket, scrolling through social media. She paused at a quote someone had posted. "Sometimes the person you're running from is the one who was running toward you all along." She scrolled past it quickly, pretending it didn't sting. But it did, deeply. As she set her phone aside, she felt a wave of guilt she couldn't explain. Maybe it was the unread messages from her aunt. Maybe it was the way her fiancé said, "You don't seem like yourself lately." Or maybe it was something she had buried so long she didn't recognize it anymore. Just as Emily stood to head to bed, her phone buzzed on the counter. A voicemail icon blinked, a number she didn't recognize. She hesitated. Her throat tightened. She pressed play, and as the message played, the blood drained from her face. It was her mother's voice. But this time, it wasn't a greeting. It was a goodbye. And then the line went silent, except for one faint sound in the background that would change everything once Emily learned what it meant. The faint sound at the end of the voicemail echoed in Emily's mind long after the message stopped playing. She replayed it again and again, each time holding her breath as though listening harder might change what she heard. Her mother's voice had been weak, thinner than she remembered, as if scraped raw by something heavier than age. "I just wanted you to know I love you," Margaret had whispered. Then came the sound. Soft, metallic, final. A click. Emily didn't know what it meant, but her body reacted before her mind did. A cold shiver crawled up her spine, and she suddenly felt as though the ground beneath her feet had tilted. She sank onto the kitchen stool, her hands trembling. Her golden retriever nudged her leg, sensing something wrong, but she couldn't focus. The voicemail had been only 22 seconds long, yet it cracked open a part of her she thought she had sealed shut years ago. Why did her mother sound like she was saying goodbye? Why had she called now, after so long? And what was that noise at the end? Her stomach twisted as fear started to take root. Slow, invasive, undeniable. If you were in her place, would you call back? Or would the truth scare you too much? Emily glanced at the time on her phone. 10:42 p.m., too late to drive across town. Too late to pretend she wasn't shaken. She pressed her palms against her forehead and tried to breathe. Margaret hadn't said she was in trouble. She hadn't asked for help. But the tone in her voice, it didn't feel normal. It felt like the last page of a book you didn't know was ending. Emily stood abruptly, pacing the kitchen as panic pressed at her ribs. Should she call the number back? Should she text her aunt? Should she tell Ryan? She didn't want to explain anything, not when she barely understood it herself. Instead, she went to her bedroom, opened the drawer where she kept the old photograph turned face down, and hesitated. Her hand shook as she lifted the frame. The picture inside showed her and Margaret at a fall festival, Emily on her mother's shoulders, both laughing beneath trees bursting with orange leaves. A memory she had buried under resentment resurfaced with startling force. For a moment, the edges of her anger softened, revealing the small, wounded girl she used to be. Have you ever told yourself a story for so long that you forgot to check if it was true? Across town, in the dimly lit brick house that still smelled faintly of lavender cleaner, Margaret lay awake in her recliner. A half-finished mug of tea sat on the table beside her, beside a bottle of heart medication she often forgot to take. The evening had drained her more than she let on. Signing the will, gathering the old photos, hearing her own voice trembling as she recorded the voicemail, she knew the end was approaching faster than she could prepare for. And yet, there was a strange peace settling in her bones, a sense that she had finally done what she needed to. She pulled the knitted blanket tighter around her shoulders, staring at the ceiling as moonlight spilled softly through the curtains. She wondered whether Emily had listened to the message, whether she had deleted it again or saved it this time, whether she felt anything at all. Margaret closed her eyes, remembering Emily as a toddler clinging to her leg, as a teenager slamming doors, as a young woman walking away without looking back. She whispered into the quiet, "I hope one day you understand why I stayed, why I left, why I couldn't tell you everything." The next morning Emily woke before dawn, the voicemail still looping in her head like a warning she couldn't escape. She hadn't slept more than an hour. She slipped out of bed quietly so she wouldn't wake Ryan, fed the dog, and sat at the kitchen table staring at her mother's number on the screen. Her thumb hovered over the call button. Her chest tightened. She pressed it. One ring, two. Then, "This number is no longer accepting calls." A chill ran through her. She called her aunt next, straight to voicemail. She left a shaky message. "Aunt Linda, can you call me? It's about my mom. I think something's wrong." As soon as she hung up, regret punched her in the gut. Why hadn't she reached out sooner? Why had she waited years instead of moments? Even as she asked herself, she knew the answer. Sometimes anger feels easier than fear. Sometimes it fools you into thinking you're safe. What's the hardest truth you've ever been forced to face once the anger faded? Ryan came into the kitchen rubbing his eyes. "Hey, you okay? You look pale." "Fio," Emily tried to explain, but when she opened her mouth, the words tangled together. She handed him the phone instead. He listened to the voicemail, his expression shifting from confusion to worry. "Emily, this doesn't sound good. Maybe she's sick. Maybe she needs help." Emily stared at the counter, tears stinging her eyes. "What if I'm too late?" she whispered. Ryan gently squeezed her shoulder. "Then we go now." Meanwhile, attorney David Collins sat at his desk, sipping weak office coffee while reviewing paperwork from the previous day. But his thoughts kept drifting to Margaret. Something about her eyes the night before had unsettled him. The quiet resignation, the tremor in her hands, the sense that she was preparing for more than a legal transition. He checked the clock. His assistant wasn't in yet. He grabbed his keys. He couldn't explain why, but he felt the need to drive to Margaret's house. Call it intuition, call it duty. But deep down, it felt like urgency. Emily and Ryan were already on the road by then, heading across Columbus as early commuters filled the sidewalks with steaming coffee cups and hurried footsteps. The sun hadn't fully risen, leaving the city washed in gray-blue shadows. Emily gripped the steering wheel tightly, her pulse hammering in her ears. She kept replaying a single thought. What if Mom needed me? What if she was alone? But right behind that came another thought. one she had never dared to touch before. What if I was wrong about her? They turned onto Margaret Street just as Attorney David's car appeared from the opposite direction. Emily parked abruptly, nearly stumbling out of the car as she rushed toward the porch. "Emily?" David said, startled. He hadn't expected her. Not yet. Not like this. "Why are you—" But Emily cut him off, her voice cracking. "I got a voicemail. Something's wrong. I can feel it." David's expression darkened. "I think we should go inside." He knocked once. No answer. He knocked again. Louder. The house was silent. Emily's breath caught as he tried the doorknob. It turned. Margaret never left her door unlocked. Emily stepped inside slowly, her heart slamming against her ribs. The living room was dim, the blanket draped over the recliner, the shoebox of letters left open beside it. But the chair was empty. "Mom!" Emily called, her voice trembling. No response. Ryan searched the kitchen. David checked the hallway. Emily stood frozen, the air thick with dread. Then she noticed something she hadn't seen at first. A pill bottle on the floor near the recliner spilled open. Her knees nearly buckled. She rushed to pick it up. But before she could process anything else, a sudden sharp sound echoed from somewhere deeper inside the house. A door slammed. Emily's eyes widened. She wasn't alone. And someone else inside that house knew exactly what had happened to her mother. Emily felt the world tilt beneath her feet as David lowered the phone, his face drained of all color. The hospital's words seemed to hang in the air like smoke, dense, suffocating, impossible to grasp. Her mother was alive. Relief hit her first, sharp and overwhelming, but it lasted less than a heartbeat before the second truth struck. What they found with her changes everything. Emily's breath caught violently in her chest. She looked at David, at Ryan, at Richard, all three men staring back at her with different kinds of shock. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Where is she? What happened?" David swallowed hard and gestured toward the living room. "We need to talk on the way. They're expecting us." Emily didn't wait for anyone else. She pushed past them and rushed toward the front door. But Richard stepped forward, guilt twisting his gaunt features. "Let me come," he whispered. Emily spun around, fury burning through her grief. "You stay away from her," she snapped. "You stay away from all of this." Richard dropped his gaze, shoulders collapsing inward. Outside, the morning air slapped her skin with freezing clarity. Ryan hurried behind her and took the wheel when her hands wouldn't stop shaking. As they pulled away from the house, Emily stared out the window, every streetlight blurring through unshed tears. She kept replaying the voicemail, her mother's weak voice, the metallic click, the fading breath. She had spent years building a wall between them, convinced she was protecting herself. But now each brick felt like a mistake she couldn't undo. If you were in her place, would you keep running from the truth, or would you finally let it chase you down? Inside Attorney David's car behind them, he drove with hands gripping the wheel tightly, fighting his own unease. Something about the hospital's tone had been wrong. Not clinical, not routine. Urgent, hesitant, as if they were holding a truth too heavy to deliver over the phone. Beside him, Richard stared out the window silently, his face ghostly pale. David considered pulling over and telling him to get out. Instead, he said, "If you know anything Margaret didn't tell her daughter, now is the time." Richard exhaled shakily. "I know I failed both of them," he murmured. "But I never stopped caring. I never wanted things to end like this." Emily kept replaying memories she had tried to suffocate for years. Her mother crying quietly in the kitchen when she thought Emily was asleep. The bruises she once glimpsed beneath Margaret's sleeve. The nights when arguments between Margaret and Richard shook the walls. But the pieces never formed a full picture. Not one Emily understood at the time. She told herself a story instead. That her mother chose the wrong man. Chose silence. Chose distance over love. That story had protected her then. Now she wasn't so sure. What if the truth wasn't what she believed? What if she had punished the wrong person? As they neared Riverside Memorial Hospital, the city buzzed with life. People grabbing coffee, parents walking kids to school, joggers braving the cold morning air. Emily pressed her forehead against the window, wondering how the world could look so normal when her entire life had just split open. Ryan reached across the center console and squeezed her hand gently. "Whatever it is," he said softly, "you won't face it alone." Emily nodded, but the truth was heavier than anything she'd allowed herself to carry before. In the waiting room, everything felt too bright, too sterile. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Nurses hurried past pushing carts of supplies. Emily's breath came in shallow bursts as she approached the front desk. "My mother?" she said, voice trembling. "Margaret Carter. They said she's here." The nurse nodded solemnly, eyes softening with sympathy. "She's stable for now," she said, "but the doctor needs to speak with you before you see her." Emily's pulse quickened. "Why? What did they find?" The nurse looked past Emily toward the hallway and signaled to someone. A doctor in a navy coat approached, tall, calm, but with a seriousness that unsettled Emily immediately. "Ms. Carter?" the doctor asked. "I'm Dr. Reynolds. Please follow me." Emily and Ryan followed, with David a step behind. Richard lingered at the entrance, unsure whether he had the right to come closer. But something in the doctor's expression made even him take a tentative step forward. They were led into a consultation room. Dr. Reynolds closed the door gently before turning to face them. "Your mother was found unresponsive early this morning by a neighbor," he began. "She had suffered heart failure, but we were able to stabilize her." Emily let out a broken sob of relief, but Dr. Reynolds wasn't finished. His expression darkened. "However, the paramedics also found something with her, something she had left on the kitchen table beside a cup of tea." Emily's breath stopped. "What?" she whispered. The doctor reached into a folder and withdrew a sealed evidence bag. Inside was a stack of papers, typed, signed, dated. Emily blinked, confusion washing over her. "Is that?" Ryan asked slowly. "The will," David said quietly. "The one she signed last night." But Dr. Reynolds shook his head. "No, that was found separately by the paramedics." He set the evidence bag gently on the table. "This is something else." Emily's pulse hammered as she opened the bag with trembling fingers. Inside, beneath a neatly folded letter, were several Polaroid photographs, a childhood bedroom, a broken picture frame, a door with deep dents in the wood, a bruised wrist, a little girl hiding behind a laundry basket. Emily's entire body went rigid. "These were found labeled with your name," Dr. Reynolds said gently. "Your mother had prepared them for you." Emily stared at the photos, unable to breathe. She recognized the settings, the walls, the carpet, the hallway. She had lived in those rooms, but she didn't remember the dents. She didn't remember the bruises. She didn't remember hiding. And yet, she did. Somewhere deep in her bones, she did. Memories she had smothered decades ago suddenly clawed their way back to the surface. Her hands shook violently as she lifted the letter. On the front, in her mother's fragile handwriting, were the words, "For Emily, when it's time to know the truth." Her throat closed. "No," she whispered. "No, no." Ryan wrapped an arm around her shoulders, but she barely felt it. The room was spinning. Her childhood, the story she told the world, the resentment she had nurtured, it all trembled like a structure built on sand. Dr. Reynolds placed a gentle hand on the table. "There's more," he said softly. "Your mother had been keeping a journal for years. The paramedics found it beside her. In it, she documented things she believed you had forgotten, or that she chose to hide from you." Emily felt her heart splinter. Tears blurred her vision. "Why didn't she tell me?" she choked. David spoke softly. "She tried, Emily. She really did." Emily closed her eyes, trying to anchor herself. She wasn't ready. She didn't want to read what came next. She didn't want to confront the possibility that the mother she abandoned had been protecting her all along. Have you ever faced a truth so heavy you wished you could go back to not knowing? Dr. Reynolds gently cleared his throat. "There's one last thing." Emily looked up through trembling tears. His expression told her she wasn't prepared. "We have security footage from earlier this morning," he said slowly. "Your mother wasn't alone when she collapsed." Emily's heart stopped. Ryan's grip tightened. David inhaled sharply. The doctor continued. And the person on the footage was someone you believed you'd never see again. Emily's entire body tensed as Dr. Reynolds spoke those final words. Someone she believed she'd never see again. Her mind raced wildly, grasping at names she had long buried: childhood neighbors, distant relatives, people who had vanished like ghosts when her life imploded years before. But one name rose louder than the rest, a name she refused to let herself consider. She shook her head as if the doctor's words were a hallucination. "That's impossible," she whispered. "There's no one left." Ryan moved closer, his arm brushing hers. "Emily," he said softly. "Who do you think he means?" But Emily couldn't bring herself to say it. Not here, not now. The room felt suddenly too small, the air too thin. She pressed her palms against her thighs, trying to steady her breathing. A lifetime of anger and confusion slammed together inside her chest as she stared at the doctor with wide, trembling eyes. "Show me," she finally managed to say, her voice cracking. "Please, I need to see the footage." Dr. Reynolds nodded. "I understand. But before we do," he added gently, "there's something else your mother asked us to give you once she was stable." He turned and retrieved a small, worn leather journal from a drawer, its edges frayed, its pages yellowed from years of handling. Margaret's handwriting covered the front. "For Emily, when you're ready." Emily reached for it slowly, as if afraid it might burn her. Her throat tightened as she held the journal to her chest, feeling the weight of every unsent letter, every apology, every truth her mother had saved for the moment her daughter finally came home. As she opened the cover, the first page hit her like a wave. "My sweet Emily, if you are reading this, then the truth has finally reached you. I never wanted you to carry my pain. I only wanted you to grow without fear." Emily's lips trembled. For a moment, anger melted into something softer, something she had forgotten she could feel toward her mother. A tiny spark of hope flickered in her chest, fragile but real. Have you ever looked at someone you blamed for everything and suddenly realized you might have misunderstood their silence? Emily flipped through more pages, some describing nights she vaguely remembered, others recounting events she had forced herself to forget entirely. Margaret had written about the bruises, the broken promises, the threats whispered behind closed doors. She had written about freezing in fear each time she considered leaving. She had written about how fiercely she loved Emily, even when Emily pushed her away. Tears dripped onto the paper, smudging the ink as Emily clutched the journal to her heart. "Why didn't she tell me?" she whispered. "Why didn't she fight for me?" David stepped forward, his voice quiet and steady. "Sometimes trauma forces people to protect in silence, even when the silence hurts. Your mother thought she was sparing you." Emily closed her eyes, feeling both fury and forgiveness battling for space inside her. She thought of all the years she had erased Margaret from her life, all the birthdays ignored, all the calls declined. The guilt pressed down hard, but beneath it, something else broke through. Something like tenderness, something like regret blooming into understanding. "Dr. Reynolds cleared his throat gently. "She's still alive, Emily. She's weak, but she's fighting. If you want to see her, I can arrange it, but I think it would be best if you saw the footage first. It will help you understand the circumstances." Emily hesitated. Seeing her mother now, frail, fragile, fighting for air, felt terrifying. But so did the idea of delaying the truth. She wiped her face with the sleeve of her jacket and nodded. "Okay, show me." "Auntie." He led them to a small security office near the ER entrance. The room buzzed with soft static from a wall of screens showing various angles of the hospital property. A guard stood from his chair and stepped aside as Dr. Reynolds clicked through files on the monitor. Emily squeezed Ryan's hand, bracing herself. Her heart felt too big for her chest. "Here," the doctor said. "This is the footage time-stamped at 5:42 a.m., shortly before the neighbor called 911. The video began. A grainy image of the parking lot, fog hanging low, a lone street lamp flickering. Then, movement. A figure stepping into frame, hunched slightly, walking with uneven steps. Emily leaned closer, breath trembling. The figure was Margaret, bundled in her blue cardigan, clutching something to her chest. She looked pale, exhausted, disoriented. Emily covered her mouth, a sob breaking free. "Mom!" But then, another figure emerged behind her. A second silhouette, taller, moving slowly, deliberately. Emily's blood ran cold. She watched as the figure reached out, not grabbing, not threatening, but steadying Margaret when she stumbled. Margaret leaned into them, trusting, relying on them. Emily's pulse hammered as the figure stepped briefly into the glow of the street lamp. The fuzzy image sharpened just enough to reveal his face. Richard Lowell, her former stepfather, the man she thought she had escaped forever. Emily recoiled from the screen as if struck. "No," she whispered. "No, he can't. He wouldn't." But she had no idea what he would or wouldn't do anymore. The footage showed Richard guiding Margaret toward the ER doors, supporting her weight as if she were precious cargo. Not hurting her, not dragging her, helping her. Emily watched in stunned silence as he pressed the emergency button, waved frantically for help, then stepped back, hands shaking violently. Ryan whispered, "He saved her." But Emily couldn't process it. Her mind fought the image, clinging to old wounds like armor. Dr. Reynolds paused the footage. The screen froze on Richard's face, lined, worn, haunted. "There's more," the doctor said quietly. "Listen." He played the audio recorded by the paramedic's body camera inside the ambulance. Margaret's faint voice echoed through the small room. "Please, please tell my daughter. He kept the truth from her too." Emily's breath hitched. Ryan's eyes widened. David stepped closer to the screen. Richard spoke next, voice breaking. "I should have told her. I should have told both of them. I'm so sorry, Margaret." Emily felt the ground fall out from beneath her. The story she had built her whole life around, her mother the coward, her stepfather the monster, was unraveling. Truths she had never considered were rising from the ashes. She stumbled back from the monitor, gripping the edge of the chair to keep herself upright. "What truth?" she whispered. "What was he supposed to tell me?" Dr. Reynolds exchanged a heavy glance with David, and then he said it, the sentence that would turn Emily's entire world upside down. "Emily, your mother wasn't the only one he was trying to protect. There was someone else involved. Someone connected to you." Emily's heart slammed painfully in her chest. "Who?" she demanded, voice cracking. "Who is it?" Dr. Reynolds hesitated, then finally answered, "Your real father." "Oh," and in that instant, everything Emily believed about her past shattered like glass. Emily stood completely still, as if the air had turned solid around her. "Your real father." The words ricocheted through her chest, shattering what little certainty she had left. She blinked at Dr. Reynolds, unable to process the meaning. "My what?" she whispered, the word father landing like a foreign object in her mouth. Ryan took an instinctive step closer, steadying her as her knees wavered. Across the room, Richard froze, his shoulders collapsing as if the truth had struck him physically. "No," Emily said again, shaking her head. "No, that's impossible. My father died when I was 2. My mother told me." Her voice cracked, but she pushed on. "She told me he died in a car accident." David inhaled slowly, as though preparing himself to step carefully onto a field of broken glass. "Emily, that's what she wanted you to believe. But sometimes lies are built to protect people, not to deceive them." Emily backed away, her chest tightening. "Protect who? Protect me?" Dr. Reynolds nodded gently. "Yes, and someone else." Emily gripped the edge of the table as the room continued to tilt. She felt like a child again, confused, scared, reaching for answers that slipped through her fingers. "Why would she lie about my father?" she whispered. "Why would she hide something like that?" Before the doctor could answer, Richard stepped forward. His face looked older than Emily remembered, etched with guilt, regret, and something that resembled fear. "Emily," he said, voice raw, "you deserve to know the truth. You always did. But your mother, she carried the burden alone." Emily's breathing turned ragged. "What truth? Just say it." Richard swallowed hard, gripping the back of a chair as though he needed it to stay upright. "Your father didn't die. He left." The sentence struck like a thunderclap. Emily's vision blurred. A ringing filled her ears. "Left?" she repeated, barely audible. "He left me?" Richard shook his head quickly. "No, he left to protect you." Emily felt her throat tighten so violently she thought she might choke. "Protect me from what? Have you ever felt your entire identity shift under your feet, as if your past were being rewritten in real time?" Emily had spent her entire life believing one story: her mother weak, her stepfather cruel, her father gone forever. Now every part of that narrative trembled like a structure on the verge of collapse. She pressed a hand to her chest, trying to slow her racing heart. "Just tell me," she whispered. "Tell me everything." Richard looked at Dr. Reynolds for permission. The doctor gave a solemn nod. Then Richard spoke words Emily would never forget. "Your father was trying to save you from me." Emily's entire body went cold. The sentence made no sense. Too twisted, too impossible. She stared at Richard, the man who had haunted her childhood shadows. "You," she breathed, "save me from you?" Richard closed his eyes, shame washing over him. I wasn't well back then. I had anger I didn't know how to control. I kept it hidden from your mother at first, but when you were born, something shifted in her. She became protective, watchful. She knew I wasn't fit to be around a baby." Emily's pulse pounded violently in her ears. "My father tried to stop you?" Richard nodded. "He confronted me. More than once. He warned your mother he would take you both away if I didn't get help." He swallowed hard. "But I didn't. And one night, he saw me lose control." Emily flinched, her stomach twisting. "Lose control? How?" Richard's voice dropped to a whisper. "I never touched you. I swear I never laid a hand on you. But he saw me throw something across the living room when you cried. He saw the rage in me. He told your mother he was taking you until I got help." Emily felt tears prick at her eyes. Not from sadness, but from the violent collision of truths she didn't know how to hold. "So he left because of you." Richard shook his head. "No, he left because he thought disappearing would keep you safe. He thought if he removed himself from the chaos, your mother would take you far away from me." He exhaled shakily. "But Margaret, she loved me, and she believed I could change." They argued. It got ugly. And eventually, his voice faltered. "He left for good." Emily pressed a trembling hand over her mouth. "Then why did she marry you? Why did she stay with you?" Richard's eyes filled with tears. "Because I promised her I would get better, and for a while, I did. But people who carry anger, they don't fix themselves overnight. She kept the truth from you because she didn't want you growing up thinking your father abandoned you. She thought the lie was kinder." Emily staggered back into a chair, tears pouring freely now. Everything she thought she knew about her parents, every memory, every resentment, was rearranging itself piece by painful piece. She felt Ryan's hand on her shoulder, but it felt far away. "So all these years," she whispered, "I hated her for choosing you, and she was protecting me from the truth." Richard nodded miserably. "Yes." A long silence filled the room, a silence so deep it felt sacred, like the moment after a prayer, before the answer arrives. Emily opened the journal again, scanning the next pages, and there she saw it, written in trembling script. "He didn't leave you, sweetheart. I made him leave me. I didn't want you growing up in a war between two broken men." Her breath hitched. Broken men. Plural. Not just Richard. "Where is he now?" Emily whispered. "My real father. Where is he?" Dr. Reynolds exhaled heavily, the weight of the next truth visible in his eyes. "There's something you need to understand," he said gently. "Your father tried to contact your mother last year." Emily's eyes widened. "What?" "He sent 2 letters. Both came back unopened. She was too afraid. Thought opening that door would reopen every wound." Emily clutched the journal to her chest, tears falling harder now. She wasn't sure if she was crying for herself, for her mother, or for the man she had never known. "So he's alive?" she asked, her voice trembling. Dr. Reynolds nodded. "Yes, and that's not all." Emily's heartbeat quickened. Ryan tightened his grip on her shoulder. David stepped closer, bracing for impact. The doctor continued softly. "He's been trying to find you, Emily felt her legs go numb. "Why?" Dr. Reynolds hesitated, then delivered the final blow. "Because he believes you're in danger." Emily stared at him, her breathing sharp and uneven. "In danger from what?" she demanded. Dr. Reynolds looked at Richard, then back at her. "Not from him." He paused. "From someone else in the story. Someone who never wanted the truth to come out." Emily's heart slammed against her ribs. Someone else. Someone tied to her past. Someone still out there. And then the doctor said it. The words that pulled the floor out from beneath her entirely. "Emily, your father says he wasn't the only man in your mother's life who posed a threat." And the moment he said it, a shadow appeared in the doorway. One Emily recognized instantly. Someone who should never have been at that hospital. Someone who had followed them. The shadow in the doorway stretched across the floor, long and unmistakably human. Emily's breath stuttered, freezing her in place. When she finally looked up, her heart slammed into her ribs. Standing there, arms tense, jaw tight, eyes flickering with something unreadable, was Detective Mark Hanley, the same officer who had once responded to her childhood home during a domestic disturbance call when she was 10. She remembered his voice, his badge, his questions. She was too scared to answer. Emily had no idea he was still alive, let alone still in law enforcement. And she definitely hadn't expected him to walk into that room now. Detective Hanley stepped forward, his heavy boots landing with controlled precision. "Emily Carter," he said, his voice low, steady, but carrying an undertone that made the hairs on her arms rise. "I need a word with you." Emily stiffened, instinctively stepping closer to Ryan. "Why are you here?" she asked. "How did you even know?" Hanley's gaze flicked toward Richard, sharp and assessing, before returning to Emily. "I was notified that your mother was admitted this morning, and considering the history surrounding your family—" He let the sentence fade, as if the rest didn't need saying. Emily's stomach twisted. She hated how he said history like her entire childhood was a case file he'd skimmed before breakfast. Attorney David stepped between them, his tone controlled but firm. "Detective Hanley, with all due respect, this is a private matter. Unless you have a warrant or immediate cause," Hanley cut him off. "I have cause." Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. "There's an open investigation connected to Margaret Carter," he said, "and new evidence was brought to my attention early this morning." Emily felt a chill seep deep into her bones. "What evidence?" Hanley didn't answer immediately. He studied Emily's face with a mixture of professional detachment and something else, something almost like regret. "First," he said, "I need to confirm whether you received any communication from your mother before she collapsed." Emily hesitated. Ryan squeezed her hand, encouraging her. "Yes," she admitted. "She left me a voicemail." "What did it say?" Emily swallowed hard. It sounded like a goodbye, and there was a noise at the end. Hanley's eyes sharpened. "A metallic sound?" Emily frowned. "Yes. How did you—" But he didn't answer. Instead, he opened his folder and slid out a photo. He placed it on the table. Emily's stomach dropped when she recognized it instantly. The old locket her mother always wore. The one Margaret had stopped wearing years ago. The one Emily assumed was lost. Now pictured lying on the floor of Margaret's kitchen, snapped open. "This was found beside your mother," Hanley said. Inside the locket was a fragment of a key, broken, old, and heavily worn. Your mother was gripping it when she collapsed. "A key to what?" Ryan asked. Hanley looked directly at Emily. "To a safe deposit box rented 24 years ago under an alias." Emily blinked. "An alias? Whose?" Hanley held her gaze. "Your real father's." Emily's breath caught violently. "My father? He had a safe deposit box?" Hanley nodded. "And based on the time-stamped logs, he accessed it only once, right before he disappeared. But here's the part that concerns us most. Someone else accessed it 2 weeks ago." Emily felt a cold shiver crawl up her spine. "Who?" Hanley placed another photo on the table, grainy, pulled from security footage inside a bank lobby. A tall figure, face blurred, wearing a baseball cap pulled low. But Emily recognized the posture instantly, the slope of the shoulders, the stance. The way he carried his weight. Her breath hitched. "No," she whispered. "No, that can't be—" Richard flinched, his face turning sheet white. "Emily," he said, voice trembling. "I swear I didn't go near that place. I didn't even know about it." "Are?" Hanley raised an eyebrow. "Interesting. Because someone using your height, your build, and wearing a jacket identical to one you reported stolen last year accessed that box." Richard's jaw dropped. "Stolen? I told you that at the station? Why didn't you ever follow up?" Hanley ignored him. His attention was back on Emily. "Inside the box was a sealed envelope," he said. "Your father left it there when you were a baby. Your mother never retrieved it because she didn't know it existed." Emily felt her chest constrict. "What was in the envelope?" Hanley shook his head. "We don't know. The envelope is missing." Emily stared at him, horrified. "Missing?" "Yes." His voice hardened. "And whoever took it didn't want the truth seen. Have you ever felt the past reaching forward like a hand, pulling you into answers you're not ready to face?" Emily felt it now, gripping her heart, dragging her breath short. Hanley leaned forward. "Your father believed someone dangerous was still around, someone who didn't want him connected to you, someone who benefited from the life Margaret built after he left." Emily's eyes darted to Richard. He shook his head violently, tears welling. "Emily, I swear to you, I didn't know about the box. Your mother never told me anything about—" But Hanley raised a hand, silencing him. "This isn't about whether you knew," he said. "It's about someone pretending to be you." A sickening realization punched through Emily. If not Richard, then who? Dr. Reynolds, who had been silent until now, cleared his throat. "Detective, if someone is actively targeting this family, we need to increase security, especially for Margaret." Hanley nodded. "Already in progress. But we have another issue." Emily looked up, dread clawing its way up her spine. "What issue?" Hanley hesitated. Not something she expected from a detective built on certainties. Then he said quietly, "We found fingerprints on the safe deposit box. Prints that don't match Richard." "Whose are they?" Emily whispered. Hanley slowly lifted a printed sheet from his folder and placed it onto the table. The name at the top made Emily's heart stop. Not because she recognized it, but because she didn't. A stranger. Someone completely unknown to her. To Richard. To her mother. To everyone. "Who is this?" Emily asked, voice breaking. Hanley answered with chilling calm. "That's what we're trying to find out. But this man has been following your family for more than 2 decades. Emily's blood turned to ice. Her voice barely escaped her lips. "Why?" Hanley's expression darkened, deeper than she had ever seen. "Because he was the last person seen speaking to your real father," he said. Emily felt her breath collapse. "The last— Before what?" Hanley met her eyes, steady, unflinching. "Before he disappeared." Bixa, and then, behind them, an alarm began blaring through the hospital hall. Loud, urgent, piercing. A nurse ran past the door, shouting, "Code Blue, room 312, patient Carter." Emily's heart shattered. "Mom!" She sprinted toward the hallway, not knowing that someone else had slipped out of the waiting room behind her. Someone who had no intention of letting the truth surface. Emily sprinted down the hallway, her shoes pounding against the polished hospital floor as the alarm echoed through every wing. Code Blue, room 312, patient Carter. The words crashed through her chest like a wrecking wave. She didn't think. She didn't breathe. She just ran. Nurses scattered around her, pushing carts, calling orders, moving with frantic precision. But all Emily could see was the door at the end of the corridor. The door where her mother was fighting for her life. The door she might have waited too long to reach. Ryan was right behind her, breath sharp, eyes wide with fear. "Emily, slow down!" he yelled. But she couldn't. Not now. Not after years of silence. Not after the truth she had begun to uncover. If you've ever run toward someone you weren't sure you deserved another chance with, then you know exactly what she felt at that moment. Just as she reached room 312, a nurse stepped in front of her, arms outstretched. "Ma'am, you can't go in yet. She's my mother," Emily cried, voice breaking. "Please let me—" But the nurse shook her head firmly. We're working on her. We need space. Emily gripped her own arms, shaking so hard she thought she might collapse. Through the small rectangular window in the door she caught flashes. Gloved hands, a defibrillator, Margaret's frail body beneath crisp hospital sheets. Her mother's chest rose and fell only when the machine commanded it to. Emily pressed her forehead against the glass, tears pouring freely. "Mom, please," she whispered. "Please don't go. Not now. Not before I can tell you." Ryan wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her close. She sobbed into his shoulder. Grief and terror tangled so tightly she couldn't tell them apart. "I can't lose her before I say I'm sorry," she choked. "I can't lose her without knowing everything." Ryan kissed the top of her head gently. "You're here now," he said. "That matters. That matters more than anything." Behind them, David and Dr. Reynolds arrived, breathless. Before they could speak, Detective Hanley appeared too, his expression dark, alert, scanning the area like a man expecting a threat to emerge from any corner. Emily didn't notice him, but Ryan did. He tensed. "Detective," he said sharply, "this isn't the time." Hanley lifted a hand. "Believe me, I know, but I need to make sure she's safe." His eyes darted around the corridor again. Something in his posture sent a pulse of dread through Ryan's gut. Someone else was here, someone who shouldn't be. Inside room 312, the staff continued their urgent work. "Charging 200 joules. Clear." Emily flinched as Margaret's body jolted. Each shock felt like it hit Emily instead, stealing her breath, rattling her bones. A few seconds later, the nurse's tone shifted. "We have a rhythm." Emily gasped, hands clasped tightly. The nurse stepped back, adjusting wires, checking monitors. "Blood pressure stabilizing?" Emily covered her mouth as a sob of relief escaped her. "Thank you," she whispered to no one. And everyone. The nurse who'd stopped her earlier gave her a small nod. "She's fighting," she said gently. "Your mother's stronger than she looks." Emily leaned against the wall, crying in quiet, broken waves while Ryan held her. In those tears were all the years she had spent angry, lost, certain she didn't need a mother who had failed her. But now, in this cold, bright corridor, she felt something else entirely. Love and grief, and a desperate longing to rewrite every moment she had wasted. A soft beep sounded from the room, then another. Margaret was stable enough for the team to step back. The nurse opened the door slightly and motioned. "You can come in now, just one person at a time." Emily didn't hesitate. She stepped inside. The room was quiet now, except for the steady hum of machines. Margaret lay pale, fragile, but alive. The sight shattered Emily in a different way, this time with tenderness. She approached slowly, afraid her presence might disturb the delicate balance keeping her mother here. "Mom," she whispered, brushing a trembling hand against her mother's thin fingers. "I'm here. I'm right here." Margaret's eyelids fluttered slightly at the sound of her daughter's voice. Her lips parted, but no words came. Emily leaned closer. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears dripping onto the blanket. "I didn't understand. I didn't know. I should have asked. I should have stayed." Margaret squeezed her hand, weak but unmistakable. Emily gasped, covering her mouth with her free hand as sobs returned. Her mother's touch, after all the years of distance, felt like forgiveness poured directly into her skin. Have you ever felt a single touch heal a wound you carried for decades? Emily felt it now. She rested her forehead against their joined hands. "I'm not leaving again," she whispered. "Not ever. I promise." Outside the room, Detective Hanley's tension only grew. He stepped back from the door and murmured into his radio. "Unit 2, check the east exit. We may have a shadow in the building." David approached him quietly. "Detective, what's happening? Why do you think someone followed us here?" Hanley didn't take his eyes off the corridor. "Because whoever accessed that safe deposit box knows Emily's about to learn the full truth, and people who hide secrets for 20 years don't usually stop when someone survives." David's face paled. "Do you think this person hurt her real father?" Hanley's jaw tightened. "I think this person made him disappear." Before David could respond, Hanley's radio crackled. "Unit 2 here. We've got movement on the stairwell, east wing. Tall male, wearing a dark jacket. Won't respond to commands." Hanley's entire body snapped into focus. "I'm heading there," he barked. He looked at David and Ryan. "Stay with Emily. No one leaves this floor." Inside room 312, Margaret opened her eyes a little wider. "Em?" she rasped. Emily leaned close instantly. "I'm here, Mom. I'm here." Margaret swallowed painfully. "There's something you need to know." Emily brushed her hair back gently. "It's okay. I know some of it. You don't have to talk right now." But her mother shook her head weakly. "No, Emily, he's not gone." Emily froze. "Who isn't gone?" Margaret's breath hitched. Tears pooled in her eyes. "Your father," she whispered. "He tried to come back, but someone stopped him." Emily felt her heart lurch. "Who?" she whispered. "Mom, who?" Margaret blinked slowly, gathering the last of her strength. "The man with the scar." Emily's breath caught. "What scar?" Before Margaret could answer, a piercing scream echoed from down the hall, a sound sharp enough to shatter every fragile second of peace. Emily jerked toward the doorway. Ryan spun toward the hallway. David flinched. And then the lights flickered. Once, twice, then went out. A single emergency light buzzed to life, casting a long, dark shadow across the doorway of room 312. A shadow shaped exactly like a man with a scar, and he was standing just outside the room. For a moment, the world seemed suspended. Every sound, every breath, every heartbeat caught in a fragile stillness. Emily stared at the shadow in the doorway, her pulse pounding so loud she could barely hear anything else. But when the emergency light flickered again, the figure stepped back, disappearing around the corner as officers shouted commands in the hallway. The danger that had hovered like a storm cloud was moving away, chased by Detective Hanley and hospital security. Emily exhaled a shaking breath, realizing only then how tightly she had been gripping her mother's hand. She turned back to Margaret, whose fragile breathing steadied slightly. The terror in the hallway faded into background noise. Here, in this room, only one thing mattered now. The truth Margaret had carried alone for too long. Emily pulled a chair close to the bedside, her voice soft, gentle, and finally free of anger. "It's okay, Mom," she whispered. "He's gone. You're safe. I'm here." Margaret's tired eyes opened, filled with sorrow and love all at once. "Emily, I'm sorry," she murmured. Emily shook her head. "You don't need to apologize. I should be the one saying I'm sorry. I left you alone. I judged you without knowing anything. I thought—" Her voice broke. "I thought you chose the wrong people. I never realized you were trying to protect me from them." Margaret gave her a faint, bittersweet smile. "I made mistakes. I should have told you sooner. I should have trusted you with the truth." Emily took a shaky breath, wiping a tear from her mother's cheek. "We both did what we could," she said. "And now, we don't have to carry it alone anymore." Margaret closed her eyes briefly, tears slipping down her temples. "Your father, he loved you. He never stopped." The words fell softly, like a final confession. Emily's heart tightened. She didn't know this man, didn't have a single memory of him, yet the thought that he had fought for her, even from a distance, shifted something deep inside her. "I want to know him," she whispered. "Not the stories, not the secrets. I want to know who he really was." Margaret nodded weakly. "I hoped you would." Emboldened by the moment, Emily pulled the worn journal from her bag. "Mom, I've been reading what you wrote. It hurts to see how much you carried alone. But it also helps me understand you." Margaret blinked slowly, her fingers brushing the cover of the journal. "I wrote those pages for the day you were ready. Not sooner, not later." Emily held her mother's hand tighter. "I'm ready now." The truth settled gently between them, no longer a painful ghost, but a bridge rebuilding what had been broken. Outside the room, footsteps pounded as officers searched the floor, but the chaos no longer controlled the moment. Inside room 312, there was finally space for healing. A few minutes later, Detective Hanley entered quietly, his expression softer than before. "He's gone," he said. "We're running surveillance footage, but for now you're safe." Emily nodded, grateful but exhausted. Hanley glanced at Margaret, then back to Emily. "I'll keep you updated on the investigation. For what it's worth, I'm sorry you had to find out this way." Emily studied the detective's face. The same man who had seen glimpses of her childhood before, even she understood what was happening. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "I appreciate everything you're doing." Hanley gave a brief nod and stepped out, closing the door gently behind him. Ryan moved closer to the bed, setting a reassuring hand on Emily's shoulder. "You're incredible," he whispered. "You walked into this storm and somehow found a way to stay standing." Emily leaned into him, grateful for his steady presence. "I don't feel incredible," she said with a weak laugh. "I feel overwhelmed, broken, but also free." It was true. For the first time in years, the weight she carried, anger, resentment, unanswered questions, had begun to lift. In its place grew something quieter, deeper, understanding, compassion, a hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. She looked at her mother again, memorizing every detail, the gentle slope of her cheekbones, the softness in her gaze, the fragile strength she radiated even now. "Mom," Emily whispered, "I want you to come live with us when you're better. I don't want you to be alone anymore." Margaret's eyes widened, and a tear slipped down her cheek. "Are you sure? After everything?" Emily nodded firmly. "Yes, after everything. It's time we start over." Margaret squeezed her hand, a gesture small in size but enormous in meaning. It was forgiveness, acceptance, and love bound into one fragile touch. Emily let the tears fall freely as she leaned forward, resting her forehead gently against her mother's. "I love you," she whispered. "I always have. I just didn't know how to say it before." Margaret's lips curved into the faintest smile. "I love you too, sweetheart." Hours passed. The hospital quieted. The emergency lights were restored, and the hallway returned to its usual rhythm. Doctors moving with purpose, nurses exchanging notes, families speaking in hushed tones. But inside room 312, time moved differently, slowly, tenderly, with gratitude. Emily stayed by her mother's bedside until Margaret drifted into a peaceful sleep. She watched her chest rise and fall, each breath a reminder of the second chance life had given them. She brushed a hand along her mother's arm and whispered, "We're going to be okay. I promise." When Ryan walked her out into the lobby, the sun was breaking over the horizon, casting warm gold across the cold floors. It felt symbolic, light returning after a long and painful night. Emily paused by the window, looking at the glowing skyline of Columbus. "Everything's different now," she whispered. Ryan wrapped an arm around her waist. "Different doesn't mean worse," he said gently. "Sometime it means finally right." Emily leaned into him, letting the moment settle in her heart. For the first time in years, she didn't feel lost. She felt grounded, connected, ready for whatever truth still lay ahead. Tomorrow, she would return to the hospital. Tomorrow, she would read her mother's journal from beginning to end. Tomorrow, she would begin the search for the father she never knew. But today was for forgiveness, for healing, for choosing love over anger. Emily closed her eyes and took a deep, steady breath. The storm had passed. The truth had surfaced. And the girl who once ran from her past was now a woman walking toward her future with open hands.